talks about a worldwide flood, of a worldwide flood, of a worldwide flood. If there really was a worldwide flood, what would the evidence be? Billions of dead things buried in rock layers laid down the water all over the earth. Billions of dead things buried in rock layers laid down the water all over the earth. Well, there really was a worldwide flood. Just look at the stony curse, with billions of dead things buried in rock layers laid down the water all over the earth.
Welcome to Creation Foundation, where we discuss the biblical worldview and the evidences for it. Also, we frequently bring in the implications of the biblical worldview and what that means to your personal thinking and your personal life. I'm Dick Temple.
And I'm Mark Finkbeiner.
And I'm Greg Morgan.
Today we're going to discuss field geology as it relates to the global flood and to the geologic column. Now, field geology is not a textbook or a classroom exercise. Field geology is where you go out and see what's going on in the real world, where you observe what is really out there in all that dirt and under all that dirt. I once called it dirt geology, but I had a geologist correct me. It's called field geology. But it's a look at the real thing, what's out there. Now, the importance of this is, if field geology indicates a long time of history, if it indicates the geologic column is accurate, then we as Christians have a problem. On the other hand, if field geology is consistent with the Bible, the biblical account of a global flood, then the evolutionists have one more enigma to add to their long list of enigmas and problems with their theory. So Mark, with all the work that you have done talking to professional geologists, field trips, study, and so forth, what's your take on field geology as it relates to the global flood?
Well, thanks, Dick. That brings up a really good question. You know, I spent a lot of time out in the field, and I have learned that you don't believe everything that you're taught in the government schools, because what they do is they just automatically subscribe long ages to these rocks and fossils. And it's interesting because Stephen Jay Gould, the late Stephen Jay Gould, he was a paleontologist. He was one of the great paleontologists when he was alive, and he stated several times that there is no evolutionary evidence in the fossil record. And so I think that's really interesting, because the evolutionists have admitted that they cannot go to the fossil record and find any intermediary links between man and ape and snow cones, between snow cones and bananas. And anyway, I want to take you to a place here, and you should be able to see these pictures up on the screen, but I want to take you to a place in Kellogg, Idaho. It's a gold mine that was started in 1881. And there's a long history to it. They dug this gold mine out, and then in a few years later, they blasted it shut, and then it was like, I believe in the early 1990s, some people found this mine, they reopened it, and when they went in, lo and behold, guess what they found on the walls growing on the mine? A very precious rock called smithsonite. Now, you don't see me having smithsonite on this table here because it's a very expensive gem. And so the point is that here we have evidence that smithsonite, it took less than 100 years for it to grow. Now, the evolutionists say that rocks and fossils, well, it takes millions of years. Well, that is not true. We have proof right here, right out in the field, that it only took about 100 years or less for smithsonite to grow. Okay? Now, I was in Arizona several years ago at a rock shop, and they had this petrified wood in their display case, and the petrified wood had amethyst in it. Now, what you're looking at right here is amethyst. And now amethyst is made up of quartz. And quartz, of course, it's silica. Now, where do you get silica? Well, the Bible talks about the fountains of the great deep shooting up out of the earth. And the hotter you make water to a certain point, the more minerals that you can absorb into that water, okay? And so, essentially, most all these rocks that you see here on the table are a result of volcanism. Well, In volcanoes, you have water. Lots of water comes out of volcanoes, and the water is warm water. When the conditions are right, when the conditions are just right, water can get into a bubble of lava, and this, by the way, was a bubble of lava, and so is this thunder egg here, found in Oregon. This is found in Brazil. You can get water, and that water is actually very soupy, and it has a high degree of silica content in it. And so when the water evaporates, it can actually leave, it leaves all the minerals inside of this bubble, and so you get these beautiful formations in these volcanic bubbles, okay? And so the point is that it doesn't take millions of years for this kind of stuff to form when the conditions are right. Now, let's talk about fossils here just for a minute. You look at the fossils here on my table, and you'll notice this fish fossil right here. One thing I've noticed about most all fish fossils that I have ever seen is that the fins are extracted. Now, anybody that goes fishing knows that when a fish dies, the fins, they relax, they go down. But almost every picture and almost every fish fossil that I have ever seen, the fins are extracted. Well, what does that prove? It proves rapid burial. Because when a fish dies, the fins, they relax. And so these fish, they were buried so fast and so hard, I mean, it was what you call a catastrophe. And the only thing that makes sense here is that it had to have been a worldwide flood, otherwise the fish could have swam away. And they couldn't swim away, and so you have these huge mudslides called turbidity currents, and they're just nailing these fish, and they're burying them so fast. I like to say it this way: the fish woke up dead. But if the fish is being buried so fast that the fish has no time to allow its fins to relax. Okay, and of course you'll see these pictures on the camera screen. And so anyway, the point is that animals, once they die, they have to be buried quickly. If they are not buried quickly, the animal begins to deteriorate. You know, bugs and birds and whatnot, they start eating the flesh, you know, and the animal starts to decompose. I grew up on a cattle ranch, and I know that after just a few months, most of the cow is gone. And so we know that animals have to be buried quickly, and they have to be buried with a lot of mud and a lot of water. And when the conditions are right, you can get a perfect fossil. Now you take like these trilobites I have right here. And these trilobites were found in Morocco. And when you look at these trilobites, you're going to notice perfect design. I mean, you can see everything there. And so you can tell just by looking at the perfect design of this trilobite, you can see all of the details. It's super clear. So you can tell that the trilobite, it had to have been buried quickly. Not over millions of years like the evolutionists say. You know, they'll say, well, an animal died and then over the years, you know, mud and water accumulated and it slowly covered it over. No. See, you don't want to believe everything you hear. Okay? You want to study this stuff out, and if it's common sense, then it's probably true. Okay? And so I also want to show you something else here that's really interesting. This here is a mammoth tooth. And this is a very famous mammoth tooth because it was found in LaGrange, Texas, by somebody that I know. My friend, he dug up this mastodon, and it was the world's biggest four-tusked mastodon that's ever been found in LaGrange, Texas. Well, guess what he found with this mastodon? Woolly mammoth bones, okay? Now, according to evolution, you should not find woolly mammoth bones with mastodon bones. Because according to evolution, the mastodons came first, and then the mammoths came after the mastodons. And so here we have proof in LaGrange, Texas, that the geologic column is wrong, okay? And so anyway, when a bone is buried, it is replaced with several different kinds of minerals in the water. That would be like silica, calcite, and pyrite. And so the bone can turn to stone. And that is what you see here. This mammoth tooth has actually, it's turned to stone. And you can even see the ivory in it. which is really fascinating. In Lebanon, there was 5 octopus fossils that were found that, according to the evolutionists, dated 95 million years old in Lebanon. And this really catch scientists by surprise because these were octopuses that were fossilized. Now, anybody knows that an octopus is a soft-bodied animal. The only hard part is its mouth. And so when an octopus dies, it is going to deteriorate rapidly, okay, super rapidly. And here's what they said. They said, unlike animals with hard shells or bony skeletons, like the octopus and squid have no hard parts. One report said that fossilizing an octopus was as unlikely as capturing a fossil sneeze. So these fossils, they were exquisitely preserved. The octopus, it had 8 arms, perfectly preserved. The tentacles and the suckers were perfectly preserved. And it even showed the internal gills and even the remnants of ink. They actually found the ink in the octopus, and it was still liquid. Oh man, I tell you, when the evolutionists saw this, they don't even know what to do with it. Because what this proves is rapid burial, once again, and we see evidence of rapid burial all over the earth. It is not an isolated incident. And when we find ink in what was once a living organism, oh my goodness, it can't be millions of years, folks. Impossible. And so, Greg, you have something that you want to share along these lines.
Yes, I do indeed. You talked about how many of these things are deposited in volcanic deposits. When we do a little field geology, and in my case, I went on a nice tour of the Columbia Gorge with creation geologists, and we came to a place along Highway 14 in the Columbia Gorge where you're surrounded by these large basalt flows, 30 feet deep and many hundreds of square miles in extent. Right in the middle of one of those, on Highway 14, you find petrified wood in the basalt. Now, here are a couple of the examples of that. Now, I picked up these 2 pieces of petrified wood and a lot of others alongside the road. They had fallen from the huge bank of petrified wood, and you're allowed to collect those that are already lying on next to the road. So these are pieces of petrified wood, and you can see that they've been heated a great deal, but they did not burn. Now, why would wood, being overwhelmed by basalt, not burn, especially in that large a quantity? Well, probably because it was very, very wet when the basalt got there. So this was wet, and as the basalt got there, the steaming from this cooled the basalt around it and kept this from catching on fire. And then over a period of just a few months, this can turn into stone, which you see here. There are many such examples of that. In the Saddle Mountains, north of Richland, Washington, and near Desert Air, you find huge deposits of petrified wood in basalt and volcanic layers. What we also find is that things are inconsistent with the record and the belief of the evolutionists on how these things were deposited. They think that if you find a collection of fossils, and we dug all of these up near Glendive, Montana, they think that if you find them there, that's where they lived and that's where they died. Well, here we have conifers. These are redwoods or sequoias. We have a raptor bone. If you've watched Jurassic Park, they're little 3-foot tall creatures. Here's the joint, and it's hollow so that it will be very light and they can move faster. So a rib of a dinosaur, but mixed in with them are sea turtle shells. And you've got garfish in there. Now, the sea turtles are from the ocean, and everything else here is from the land, except for the garfish. So how do you get a mixture of things that live on the land and things that live in the ocean. Well, a global flood explains that. Flood overwhelms everything, mixes it all up, deposits in what appears to be a random order. Here is a seed from some kind of a tree. I'm not sure exactly which one that is. But again, land and ocean things together, that means they didn't get buried and fossilized in the place they lived. It got buried pretty much randomly as a flood went over this area. Here, near Glendive, you also find huge deposits where there are dozens of seashells all mixed together. There's clams, there's little tiny ones, there's big ones, brachiopods, and many others. Why would you get such a mixture of them, and why would they be all uniformly in the same place? Because the flood sorts these things, but in nature you don't find all these things living together. Mark showed you that very large fish fossil with the fins extracted. Here are dozens of fish fossils, each with its fins extracted, again indicating very rapid burial. And yes, these also woke up dead. But these especially are interesting because the evolutionists say that each little layer, about a 16th of an inch thick, was laid down in 1 year, and then the next layer, 16th inch thick, was laid down the next year on top of it. And that kept going for all 18 inches of this, and for all roughly 2,000 feet deep of the Green River Formation where this is found. But an interesting thing about this is that several of these fish go through several layers. Dr. Dwayne Gish, the Institute of Creation Research, has been heavily criticized for claiming that this was true. But take a look right there. That fish starts off on this layer, goes down through 2 layers, and ends up on this one. This fish goes through 2 layers. This fish, which we'll get from this direction, this fish goes through 4 layers. Now, if the evolutions are true, then this thing died and it lay there for a year and soil accumulated around it, and nothing ate it, including no bacteria got to it, and the fins didn't go in. It then lay there for another year while another layer was laid down on it, and another year, and yet a 4th year, and in all that time, it's lying there basically on the bottom of the lake, exposed to anything that might want to eat it, like crabs or other fish, and somehow it managed to survive for 4 years that way? I don't think so. But also on this plate, you find this little lump right here. First, this fish goes up onto that lump and back down, and it has its fins extracted, but the very existence of this lump says there's something wrong with that theory. This was not laid down as little tiny layers. It's a nice ball, which is what you get when you have a rapid flow of water, very muddy. Mark called it a turbidity current, and this is consistent with a turbidity current that overwhelmed all of these fish. The fish were flowing along in the mud with the water, and then when it stopped, it settled down into these shapes. As it flowed, it created little balls of stuff that was tumbling along. This is entirely consistent with the biblical flood, and it tells you that the Green River Formation is not evidence for 35,000 years, as the evolutionists claim it is. The Green River Formation is evidence for a very short period thing. And it's not just this one. I got this one a few years earlier, and this one, which I got from Ulrich's outside Fossil Butte, you'll also find that this fish goes through several layers, and this fish is on one layer. You travel around here without going through any layers, and you come up to this. There's no layers in this way, but there are several layers this way. That again indicates that something is different than what the evolutionists tell you it is. This was not laid down as individual layers 1 year at a time, but something was happening that it's a result of flow. This was a turbidity current that overwhelmed these fish.
Okay, let's try to summarize a few of the things you gentlemen have said. First of all, we have no intermediate fossils for evolution to take place. Then you discuss the formation of fossils, which requires rapid burial. When the rapid burial occurs, it has to occur in a moist environment in which there are certain types of minerals in the water. Then as the individual that is being fossilized decomposes, it is replaced by the minerals so that it turns from bone to stone. Now in the case of the fish fossils, we see that it was laid down very rapidly. We saw the pictures of these fossils. The evidence is very contradictory to what you will find if you go to the museums there around where those formations are. Now, in the case of the petrified wood in the basalt, the evidence is that this occurred during the global flood, was when this basalt was laid down. It picked up this wood, which was waterlogged at the time, and then the minerals in the water replaced the wood, and now we have fossilized wood. So what we're seeing here in field geology and the few things that we've discussed this morning is that the global flood is consistent with field geology, or the field geology is very consistent with the global flood, yet the explanation of the geologic column does not match up with field geology. All you have to do when discussing creation and evolution as a creationist is tell the rest of the story. And today we have all kinds of resources. The problem is you can't just go down to your Bible bookstore and find the good information. And sometimes you need to go to places like the creationist websites. You just cannot get some of the really good creation science books into a bookstore. So you need to go to sources where you can get it. Now, for instance, here's a book, Creation Geology, that's very simple. You know, it's meant for kids, so it works real good for guys like me who are not geologists. Greg, you had some information that you brought with you, that resources that could be of value to people.
Yes, indeed. For people who want a general view of the creation evolution question, you can go to Answers magazine. And this is put out from Answers in Genesis. Some of you know who Ken Ham is. And this is a very good magazine. It is for high school graduates and for just about everybody, actually. It includes a kids section in every issue of it. For those of you who want something a little bit more technical, there's the Creation Quarterly. The Creation Research Society publishes a quarterly magazine, and some of the articles are over my head, but for those who are interested in that field, it should be a very good way to get some technical answers to questions you may have. We can also go to things like this one, which I hope they will still have in print and is still available some places. It's called In 6 Days, and it's a book where 50 scientists, all with PhD level degrees, have written their view of why they believe that the Earth was created in 6 days. There was a follow-on book, and it's interesting to me that here we have lots of PhD scientists who believe this, and yet the evolutionists will claim that no PhD scientists believe it. Well, get the book. You'll find what the truth is. You'll find the rest of the story, including you'll find that some of these have been discriminated against on their job because they believe in a recent creation, they believe in biblical creation. And that's one of the most insidious things about all this, is that people get discriminated against because of their beliefs about whether we have a recent creation or ancient creation. I don't believe that either group should be discriminated against. We should talk with one another and not just talk at one another. So there's lots of information available out there, and the scroll on this program has several of the addresses you can go to get further information.
Yeah. Mark?
You know, to go along with what you were saying, you know, you got to tell the whole story. I like this old saying, and it goes like this: it's what you learn after you know it all is what counts. And you know, you get around some of these people that believe evolution, and you'll find that all that they know is what they've been taught in school. They have textbook answers, and their thinking does not go out this way. It's almost like they have tunnel vision, is what they've got. And so you try to teach them something, you try to show them some new evidence, like those fish fossils, you know, where one fish is swallowing another fish. Or you try to tell them about how oil is formed and how quickly it can be formed. You know, and it's like it just goes through one ear and out the other, because if they weren't taught it in the government schools, well, then it can't be true. Because they can only think one way, you know, tunnel vision. And, you know, oil can be formed in a matter of minutes. All you got to do is squish something hard enough, you get the oil out of it. It doesn't take millions of years, and that's provable.
And a national laboratory in Richland, Washington, created fossils in as little as 24 hours. Now, those are pretty special conditions, but that does show that's what it takes, is the right conditions, and you can form fossils rapidly.
Well, we here at Creation Foundations would like for you to have the rest of the story. And we may not be covering the things that are the most important to you, the questions that you have. So if you would like to contact the television station here, KRLB, with a question that you would like us to cover on this program, we would be happy to give you the information. What we would like to do is give you the rest of the story.
The Bible talks about a worldwide flood, of a worldwide flood, of a worldwide flood. If there really was a worldwide flood, what would the evidence be? Billions of dead things buried in rock layers laid down by water all over the earth. Billions of dead things buried in rock layers laid down by water all over the earth. Well, there really was a worldwide flood. Just look at the stony curse, with billions of dead things buried in rock layers laid down by water all over the earth. The Bible talks about Noah and the ark in a worldwide flood, where the world was judged. If there really was a worldwide flood, what would the evidence be? Billions of dead things buried in rock layers laid down by water all over the earth. Billions of dead things buried in rock layers laid down by water all over the earth. Well, there really was a worldwide flood. Just look at the stony curse, with billions of dead things buried in rock layers laid down by water all over the earth. The Bible talks about a worldwide flood. Could the fossils be the proof we see? If there really was a worldwide flood, what would the evidence be? Billions of dead things buried in rock layers laid down by water all over the earth. Billions of dead things buried in rock layers laid down by water all over the earth. Well, there really was a worldwide flood. Just look at the stony curse, with billions of dead things buried in rock layers laid down by water all over the earth. Billions of dead things buried in rock layers laid down by water all over the earth. Billions of dead things buried in rock layers laid down by water all over the earth. Well, there really was a worldwide flood. Just look at the stony curse, with billions of dead things buried in rock layers laid down by water all over the earth. Billions of dead things buried in rock layers laid down by water all over the earth. Billions of dead